is the Lamborghini Countach. Now, rumor has it, back in the 70s, before the car had a name, it drove by an Italian farmer who screamed, "Countach," which meant, holy shit. And that's about how I feel right about now. Jordan, not every scene is about you.
Preludes.
This is one of those days that you dream about. I am so blessed to be able to drive this 1987 Countach 5000S QV. Now, the Countach was made from 1974 to 1990. It had a long run. It was the successor to the Miura, which looked nothing like the Countach whatsoever. In fact, it looked nothing like anything that had ever been produced in the world. And that's what made it so popular amongst teenage boys and successful businessmen of that era. The first Countach was the LP400. LP for longitudinally positioned. It had a 4-liter V12 making 375 horsepower. With its aluminum body panels over its tubular space frame, it weighed just 3,100 pounds, which even by today's standard, was fancy carbon fiber and magnesium, is extraordinarily light. The V12 in this car is absolutely legendary. In fact, it was first created in 1963 for the Lamborghini 350 GT, and it finished production in 2010 with the Murcielago SV. That's nearly a 50-year production run of predominantly the same engine. It just kept getting bored out, all the way from a 3.5-liter to over 6. The LP400 had no wing, it had extremely skinny tires, but that changed abruptly in 1978 when they came out with the LP400S. That had a massive optional wing and the widest tires available on Earth at the time, 345 millimeters across. That is massive. The car was expensive, $85,000 at the time, which is well over $300,000 in today's money. But the craziest part is how much the wing actually costed. At $5,000, it was nearly 6% of its $85,000 MSRP. If you compare that to something like an Aventador SV, that's like a wing costing $30,000. But everyone seemed to want it, and so they put it on the car. In 1982, the Countach was dubbed the LP500S. That had a bored-out V12 with 4.8 liters. 3 years later, they came out with the 5000S QV. QV stands for Quattro Valvoli, which means 4 valves per cylinder. This, a 1987 5000S QV, is that same vehicle. At the beginning of the QV production run, it had 6 Weber carburetors located on the top of the V12, but towards the end, a lot of the cars were fuel injected, like this one. The only unfortunate part is that the carbureted variant made 455 horsepower, which is astronomical at the time. With a car that weighed only 3,285 pounds and 455 horsepower, that's a better power to weight ratio than a 2013 BMW M3 with 414 horsepower and well over 3,500 pounds. When it went to fuel injection, however, the power dropped to the M3's equivalent of 414, which we have in this car here. Ferrari's answer to the Countach was the Testarossa. Made from 1984 to 1991, many more Testarossas were produced than the very limited Countach. Over 7,100 Testarossas were made as compared to just over 2,000 Countaches. Countach? I don't know what the plural of Countach is. The Testarossa also made 24 horsepower less, at just 390, and it weighed 500 pounds more. Power to weight ratio was nothing compared to the ultimate Countach. Stylistically, the Testarossa was also extremely different to the Countach. Testarossa was designed by Pininfarina, and honestly, it didn't have much in the way of design elements other than the signature 5 vents on the sides of the car. Those helped airflow flow into the rear-mounted radiators, and also, that was the reason why the car was so wide. The Countach, however, looked absolutely ludicrous. And that's why I love it. It's not exactly gorgeous, it's not really classically beautiful or good looking, but it's wild. And that's what Lamborghini needed in order to compete with somebody with such an intense racing heritage and hadn't yet proved themselves as a true competitor to Ferrari. Now, I'm sure in modern day times, Ferrari probably still doesn't think Lamborghini is a true competitor, although their Lamborghini Huracan Performante and SV Nürburgring times probably beg to differ. The Countach's exterior is mind-boggling. It has the signature NACA vents in the doors. It also has massive intakes located behind my head, The wing is huge. I can't see anything out the back. It looks like a giant wedge of flair, power, and money. And that's what this car was all about, especially finished in this balloon white color with a red interior. Not only is this an extremely rare color combination, it's also simply stunning. So what is it actually like to drive? Driving this car is an adventure, a sweating, aggravating adventure. The steering is, of course, very, very tight. The clutch is the tightest of any pedal I've ever felt. It takes an extreme amount of force to put it into any of the gears, and it's hard to imagine driving this thing anywhere close to its top speed, because it feels like it would just rattle apart. On the inside, I have absolutely zero headroom. My head's been pressed against the roof the entire time. The seat adjustments are extremely limited, 2 manual adjustments for sliding it forward and backwards, and also a tilting feature, which kind of rocks like this, so that you can tilt your head back a little bit, but then you can't really see anything, you're kind of driving like this. Visibility out the front is phenomenal. The way the hood slopes down in the front, you can see the road ahead of you. It reminds me of a similar driving position, honestly, this is a weird comparison, to some of the newer McLarens. The roofline is also pretty high, not actually off the ground, but in terms of where your eyesight is, so you can see up above as well, to every single car that's higher off the ground than the Countach. Out of the sides, you can see nicely, although the windows are hilarious. We have manual roll-down windows that have about 3 inches of travel here on the side. The top part doesn't open. I'm not really sure why it's split, but you know what? I won't argue with their design. Out of the rear, you can't see anything. Backing this car up is one of the most terrifying experiences in the world. Not only is it a $500,000 car, but it's also very hard to drive. It's hard not to stall, actually. I haven't stalled it yet, knock on wood, but the clutch is very touchy. It demands just the perfect amount of feathering of the clutch and the throttle to make the car not angry. This is not really a bull that you want to upset. So for filming, we're deciding to back up to turn around. Now, the backup technique invented by Jeremy Clarkson and also people from the factory is to raise the door. Scissor doors go up, and then you can actually see behind you because the visibility is so limited. Reverse gear is actually up and to the left. Oh, the steering is so tight at slow speeds. I don't think I've ever done something this scary. Backing up a Countach, ladies and gentlemen, takes balls of steel. Well, and I stalled. Told you it was hard to drive. I don't know if you can tell, but yes, it's hot outside, but everything to do with me sweating is the stress and the just sheer manpower it takes to drive this car. Everything, man and machine, but turned up to 11. And I guess that's part of its appeal. It is a very raw driving experience. Oh my God. Steering lightens up a little bit as we get faster. Really, the true pleasures of the Countach are the sound from that naturally aspirated V12 and the looks. I mean, absolute poster looks. Everyone during the 70s and 80s had a Countach on their wall if they were interested in cars. Let's give it some gas in a second. Oh, that gated manual shifter is such a classic in Lamborghini and Ferrari world that we're gonna miss in today's modern cars. The odds that Lamborghini builds a manual transmission ever again are probably 0. Oh, an Aventador, hello, V12 brethren. Having driven a Murcielago and an Aventador, those cars are much easier to drive, they're much faster, but they're not more exciting than this. This is actually, despite the fact that I don't look like I'm having any fun, it's because I'm both having the time of my life and I'm also more scared than I've ever been in my entire life. This is the most thrilling driving experience I've ever had. Does the car drive well? I'll be honest, not really. It feels sluggish through the turns, the steering has some slop in it, the transmission's hard to use, it's not exactly the most powerful. It's terrifying, to be honest. But But just the smile on everyone's face as you drive by and the trip through history that you're taking with driving a Countach is worth it, sort of, until you have to park this thing. If you have to park a Countach or reverse it, I mean, honestly, if you can afford one of these cars, you might as well have a personal caretaker for your vehicles and have them park it for you, because this thing is a handful when you're going at slow speeds. If you're a valet, I'd say just avoid this at all costs. No matter how much you want to drive a Countach, it's probably not worth it if you don't get to take it over 10 miles an hour. I love the 80s tachometer and speedo. Just the look on people's faces as I go by. The speedo at 40 miles an hour right now is going like this. The tachometer is all over the place. And that's about, my heart is about all over the place, just like the speedo is. Oh my God. Whoa. Let's get a little acceleration run, shall we? That's flat out. There we go. Comes alive after 5,000 RPMs. That sounds so good. There we go. Woo! The brakes, yeah, they don't work very well. Nothing mechanically, of course, comes anywhere close to a modern day supercar. I mean, of course it doesn't. This is a car from the 80s, but back then, its top speed, its power, its low weight were out of this world. And it's crazy to see how far Lamborghini has come since then in terms of their performance. To think about daily driving this, I mean, that'd be a joke. This is a car you take out once a week for a nice cruise. You make sure there's no traffic. You do it early in the morning. And you have police block off the road so you don't have to deal with any of that nonsense. You go to lunch, you have some champagne, and you bring it back, and you hook up with your insanely hot blonde wife. Not a bad life, I'd imagine. This car is actually for sale right now. I got a link in the description below, Exotic Auto Sales. Check it out. If anything, there's some awesome pictures. This car is absolutely wild. I've never driven a Countach, and I might never get the opportunity to drive one again. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience I'll never forget. It's been underwhelming and overwhelming in other regards. All I can say is, Countach! This is ridiculous. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next video.